My name is Deanna Finch, and I'm the Executive Director of United for Children. Before we get started with the meat of the conversation, I want to give you an update of where United for Children is today. Our vision is that every child have the foundation to thrive, regardless of race, zip code, or ability. And what we currently do to build that foundation is empower child care providers to continuously improve their quality of care by offering them free support, education, coaching, assessments, quality improvement plans, and a collaborative, systematic method of connecting families, children, and providers to the many resources they need, also that children can receive the attention, nurturing, education, and love that they deserve. Why is this even a nonprofit service? A few staggering statistics I want to share with you about outcomes for our children, especially in Missouri and in St. Louis, is that the state of Missouri has the highest level of preschool suspensions in the nation, with St. Louis being the highest concentration in the state. And in fact, in St. Louis, children score 61% higher in social emotional delays than the national average. In Missouri, pre-K kids are 10 times more likely to be expelled than in kindergarten through 12th grade, over 2 times the national average. And in fact, African-American pre-K kids are even more likely. Kids showing challenging behaviors or aggressive behaviors, they are 50% higher in continuing challenges and showing a higher chance of being suspended in K through 12 and dropping out before graduation. The national statistics say that 3 of the top 5 areas that has the highest suspension rate in elementary school is in St. Louis. That every child in our vision is really aspirational. The truth is that our research-backed, proven, and trusted programs don't reach every child. Our programs have been siloed by our funding structure. We've been around for 50 years, and we have mainly been a government contractor for the many great programs that they have sponsored, or by one major funder and one program at a time. And through that siloed funding structure, we are not able to achieve that great mission and vision that we set out to do. Our work is being demanded by childcare providers and families all across Missouri and Illinois, yet we have not been able to provide all those services to everyone who wants them. We should reach every child, and we can do that by diversifying our funding, bolstering our current work, and the future design of building equitable, high-quality early childhood experiences. The good news is that we have been announced as the community lead for the Department of Education, Elementary and Secondary Education for the Preschool Development Grant St. Louis Regional Hub. This is part of the work that we've been working towards in scaling up our work that we originally created in the Normandy Schools Collaborative of coordinating services of our trusted partners of service providers, so that and connecting them to childcare providers and families and children, so that there's the decluttering of information and resources for families to meet all their needs without interrupting their day or creating more stress in their lives. This is part of that system of our services that we envisioned several years ago and been working hard to lift up. Families need so many resources to thrive and for children to be ready for school, to be healthy, to help them their families fight out of poverty. We know that we will need to do more than what the state is requiring in this work, more than what we've been doing in the past, and we will be using this opportunity to build it as needed in collaboration with the community. So just a few years ago, we created a new strategic plan that really took all of our expertise and our experience in the programs that we have operated over the several years, and said we cannot just keep doing one service at a time. We have to find a way to be able to bring this all together in one systematic, coordinated, and collaborative structure so that all these services can get to children. And we can't do it alone. We have to have other service providers out there and working together with them so that we can make those essential connections with child care providers who are responsible for so much for the developmental needs of children, and they need help. So we created that new strategic plan. We've been working really diligently over the last couple of years to redesign our work. And then COVID-19 happened right in the middle of our strategic plan. But out of all the horrible things that have happened through the last year, and especially with the pandemic, it allowed us the opportunity to actually really lift up that new design and create community collective hubs in the St. Louis region, in the most vulnerable populations, where we are focusing the majority of our work in St. Louis, where there is the highest need and the worst outcomes for our children in those areas. And the leader child care providers that have great relationships with us and their communities already raised their hand and said, we want to help our community in a way that others aren't able to reach. We can't leave our kids to go to the mass distribution events for diapers or food or masks. And we need to figure out a way how we can get it to our communities who can't get there. So those childcare providers generously took on the work of bringing in boxes, thousands and thousands of boxes of those supplies, and handing them out to their communities, handing out to the childcare providers around them and to their families. And we were able to see a huge uptick in people really understanding the importance of high quality early childhood education. We've always known that to be true, but the pandemic really highlighted the fact that childcare providers are the most essential in the system of a family's work life. And without childcare providers, families can't go to work, they can't go to school. And we really, as a community, were able to see that highlighted last year. But we can't forget that just because the pandemic may be slowing down or maybe getting comfortable, that childcare providers are not less important. They are just as important as they were before, during, and even more so afterwards, so that we can get back to building our economy and building the skills of our kids and meeting the needs, the many needs that our families have right now, to get back up on our feet. So I just want to highlight that point. And then also we were just named the St. Louis Regional Hub Leader, and we have many conversations coming out of that, and we will be updating you a lot. And the new design is really coming to fruition, and we are comparing it to a continuum of care. And we'll be making announcements more over the next year on how that's going to start coming to fruition for all of our child care providers. So if you're a child care provider on here, know that we are going to be informing you more of what services we have available and what other services are going to be available to you soon. So thank you again for you being here. If this feels good to you so far, give me a thumbs up or put in a chat how you're feeling today. And thank you again for being here. So we are so happy that we're not alone in our vision for vulnerable children in St. Louis. And thank you again for making children a priority by being here. We have a great agenda this afternoon. We've used the feedback that we received last year at our Lunch and Learn, and then our first Lunch and Learn this year, and created a series that dives more deeply into why United for Children does the work we do and why our most vulnerable children and communities need more investments in early childhood learning. Today's panel discussion will focus on how our United for Children team addresses racial bias in our daily work with child care providers. Our moderator will be Beth Chingoti. Beth is a member of the United for Children's Board of Directors and serves as the advancement chair for the board. When she's not championing United for Children, she is the diverse client segment leader at Wells Fargo Advisors. Thank you, Beth, for being here. Our panelists are Rashawn Bush. She is United for Children's Director of Programs Achieving Quality in the Normandy School District Collaborative. Gail Wolf is United for Children's Director of Inclusion Services that meets the needs of children with challenging behaviors or special needs all throughout Missouri. And Brittany Wilson, United for Children's Lead Outreach and Premium One Specialist in the Programs Achieving Quality program as well. So thank you again, and get comfortable, eat your lunch, and enjoy the information we're going to give, and feel free to engage with us via chat. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dee. And thank you all for joining us today and for the opportunity to speak with you. As Dee mentioned, I'm Beth Chingoti. I am the advancement chair for United for Children. And you already covered it well. In my day job, I work on the diversity, equity, and inclusion team at Wells Fargo Advisors. Through the work that I do, through the children that I raise, and through just being a quality human, equity in early childhood education has always been really close to my heart. And so as I started to look at opportunities to partner with organizations in our community, United for Children immediately came to mind, and I was thrilled to do it. So I am thrilled to be leading our conversation this morning with our three incredible panelists. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive right in because they've got lots of great information to share, and I don't want to monopolize too much of our conversations. So with that, happy to invite up our four panelists to come and join us. So if everyone can, my panelists can unblock their videos, perfect. So first, so again, our conversation this morning is going to be with Brittany, Gail, and Rashawn, all of whom are on the phone here with us. So my first question, how does racial bias show up in the early childhood education community in St. Louis? And Rashawn, I'm happy to hear from you first, please.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. So as you all know that, we work with a variety of early learning centers in the St. Louis and beyond areas. And some of the ways that racial bias shows up, it comes down to state funding and resources. And what I mean by that is we work with childcare facilities that may not have all the funds to be able to help them get through that accreditation or get to that accreditation process. When I say state funding, so let me explain. Once you become an accredited center, if there's an increase in pay per child if you receive state children. So once you get that increase in pay, you are able to pay your teachers more. There are things that you are able to afford more in your facility, and your children will have an opportunity to be exposed to a little bit more of some of the equitable resources that all children should have. And in some of our cases, in the state, it just depends on who comes in to who is your representative and how they interpret the licensing. And so in some cases, and this is not to blame anyone at all, this is just an observation from working with child care professionals. How the licensor book is read and how it is determined is deeply upon who is the person that's coming in to look at your resources. So if someone comes in and reads and interprets the book the way that they choose versus what is in the actual book, what happens is that person who is the owner of the center, sometimes they don't know. They become, nervous and they just kind of do whatever that licensor says. And we just want to make sure that all the women and men that we work with who own these facilities have the resources. So one of the things that we do is we make sure that they have all up-to-date licensor books. And if there are any questions, we try to help them navigate the system and even put them in contact with individuals. So then that way they can. And we really want to teach them how to be autonomous in this, but also give them the legs so that way they can stand on their own, so they can, become accredited, because that is the goal, is for these centers to become accredited and also be recognized throughout the state of Missouri, because then they list you on the websites as an accredited center. So all of those things contribute to the betterment of your center. And so that's just kind of one way for me that I have seen the racial bias, how it shows up in early child care.
Excuse me, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Gail, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yes. So going to the question was, how do I see racial bias?
Racial bias in our early childhood education community.
Rashawn really hit one of the key points, and that is resources. In my role as Director of Inclusion Services, I have the privilege of going to centers across our community, both in our affluent areas and in our poorer communities. And I have seen these disparities, right, it's very clear. If you go to a center that is in West County, St. Peters, or Lake St. Louis, versus if you go to a center in our inner cities, the toys and the equipment is typically is of a higher quality. Additionally, they have more access to resources for assistance or staffing. And Rashawn mentioned about those centers that accept state subsidy. Many of those centers in our more affluent areas aren't accepting children who need state subsidy in order to access quality childcare. And so you have this de facto segregation within our community, where you have our poorer, typically right now in our St. Louis area, Black communities who don't have resources. And then we have very limited children of color accessing those affluent centers in other parts of our community.
That's excellent. And as you spoke about sort of de facto segregation, I know that prior to our conversation today, I know many of us reviewed the Delmar Divide materials. And I know many of us, candidly, any of us who live in St. Louis and care about this conversation, St. Louis is a challenging city with regards to many of, Gail, as you articulated, kind of that de facto segregation and the policies which candidly for years kind of kept us very segmented. So understanding all of that and understanding sort of with that base foundation that we all acknowledge of the challenges, in what ways do you keep that racial bias at the forefront of your mind and address it through your work? How does U4C really encourage you in that piece? Rashawn, I'd love to start with you again, if you don't mind.
So one of the ways that we keep the racial bias at the forefront of our minds, I will say, as being an African-American woman, and most of the centers that I work in, not all, but the ones that for my particular project, we're all African-American women and men. And we constantly, like, the racial, it's at the forefront of our minds. It is who we are, it is what we wear, it is how it's our being in any space that we are in. So we are constantly aware of our Blackness when we are in any space outside of our own comfort zone. The one driving force for me is considering that all children need equitable resources. Like, we need to figure out how do we understand who we are in our own spaces, but then how do we also make sure that all children that come across us have the same resources, as Gail mentioned, in West County. These kids that are in these spaces that have magnificent teachers. I've come across some of the best teachers in St. Louis City, in North County. I have worked with some of the most amazing teachers, and they're not given an opportunity. They're not giving a chance. And because, as we stated above, these centers have a difficult time becoming accredited because the cost of accreditation is $1,500, which can take out of, which doesn't include all of the other expenses that comes with that. We need to figure out, what does it look like for all children to have, not just those that are wealthy versus those that are poor. Every child needs to have an equitable education. And so for me, that's just making sure that children are not punished for what they don't have. You cannot punish someone for things that they don't have, especially going back to what Gail says, is that de facto segregation. We can't punish you because you were born into a system that didn't include you. So that's how we continuously have those conversations and how we keep that, at the forefront of our minds.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Brittany, I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to hear your voice as well today. Is there anything you'd like to add? Again, thinking about how we keep racial bias at the forefront of your mind and in your work and addressing it through your work?
Like I said, I'm gonna agree with everything Rashawn says, but I'm just gonna add a couple of things. Like I say, always, like we have to always, like she say, understand that what we going into, always think about the things that's always been going on and just keep it up front. Don't sugarcoat anything when it comes to our providers that we're dealing with. Just, hey, just let them know up front everything we know. We'll keep them with the good resources that we have. And just like I say, always just have their back and know some resources that we have to go through. And because we have experience, just because we have experienced some of the things that they are going through, because we was raised, was born in the area, so we know a lot of things that will comes with that. So that's why I always try to keep it, keep the main things up forward.
Absolutely. Gail, I'd love to hear your perspective as well. Obviously, in full transparency, you and I are not African-American women. And so while absolutely, that is tailoring a lot of what we do, I'd love to get your thoughts as well.
I make a conscious effort in our outreach in order to make sure that to address some of the systematic racial biases that I see. Like we are able to provide some resources to our providers in order to support their inclusion of children with challenging behaviors. And so when we do our outreach, I specifically focus on areas that are less served or that are underserved. For myself, as a Caucasian woman, it is I do have to constantly make sure that I ask what biases am I bringing to my work. I also have to be aware when I go into some centers where we are called to consult and provide services if a child has any delays, disabilities, or challenging behavior. And so if I am asked to consult for a child of color, I stop and ask myself, where is this coming from? Are the expectations age appropriate for this child? Because oftentimes, especially for African-American boys, the expectation is that they act and behave at a older level or a more mature level than what is age appropriate. So it is basically a constant check on myself, as well as seeking input from my friends around me. Brittany and I and Rashawn and I have all worked very closely together. I worked in the PAC program for over 5 years in the Normandy School District area. And I rely on my friends to call me out if there is any biases of my unconscious biases that come to play.
That's excellent. And thank you all for sharing this vulnerability and transparency, because that's, I think, as we all know, that's how conversations happen, and that's how change really happens, is when we really start to have some tough conversations. So many of us, everyone can be a child advocate, but not all of us have the skills that you all have, or that candidly, obviously, our providers have. So what can child advocates who don't work in childcare, but who care very deeply about the topic, do to help minimize racial bias in early childhood education? Rashawn, what do you think? I'm going to go to you first. I'm kind of sticking to a pattern.
Okay, sounds great. I really believe some of the ways that we can that you can advocate for children is you need to understand that these inadequacies exist. They are not made up. They are not just in individuals' heads. They are real lived experiences and real things. And one of the ways you can advocate is to call it out. Call out racial bias and racial inequities and racial prejudice when you see it. And it doesn't always mean racial. I mean, there can be sexual orientation, there can be religious. You need to call it out. I believe in calling a thing at that moment and not waiting, because what happens is if there is a seed that is planted, that seed will grow. So if you can stop the seed from growing, you take away the power from that situation. So learn how to be in alliance with others. So then that way we can work together to support all children. It is important that we support all children, not just a select few, that we believe that all children have the opportunity and the right to have an equitable life and education.
Absolutely. I agree with you so deeply on that. If y'all will allow me a moment to go off script, I think as candidly, right? So as a child advocate who definitely does not have the skill set to work at childcare, just ask my own family. But I think organizations like U4C, candidly, are one of the best ways that we can get involved, right? So think about, and Rashawn, I'm going to take what you said and take it even a step further, if you don't mind, because I agree with you 100%. You got to name it, you got to recognize it. And so for many of us, and I'm speaking candidly, I mean, I'm speaking to all of us, but particularly for white women, there's an opportunity for allyship, but that allyship has got to be rooted in education. It is, to your point again, it's acknowledging that it's there. It's acknowledging the inequities. If you still have questions with regards to systemic inequities, there is a lot that you can learn. There is a lot that you can unlearn first and then relearn. We have some incredible opportunities and partnerships and groups here in our community. Whether you're a parent and you want to look at something like We Stories to help you diversify your bookshelf, or whether you've got, we always talk about time, talent, and treasure. United for Children is absolutely the premier organization in St. Louis for early childhood education and equity, and one of the few groups that's really has a laser focus on the racial equity and disparities that we're speaking about today. So just to put a small plug in there, we are always looking for more talent. We're always looking for more folks to join our organization and support the work that we're doing. Whatever it is that you do in your day job, there is a time and space and place for you. So I share that to say, Dee, it's true, they did not pay me, but I love this organization more than anything. So absolutely, as a takeaway to this, don't hesitate to reach out if you do have some bandwidth and you want to get more closely involved, because the board would love more members. That all being said, Gail, I know I sort of stole the mic on you a little bit. So Brittany or Gail, is there anything else that you all would like to add to what Rashawn said, or my board commercial as well?
I would just reiterate what you said as far as raising your own awareness, educating ourselves about systematic racism, identifying it and recognizing it in the community, because then we can question. Then we can ask our candidates who want our vote how they are going to address systematic racism. And we are always looking for time and energy from people to help us in the work.
Absolutely. I saw a quote yesterday that I loved. I've heard the fishbowl analogy many times, but I saw it again yesterday, that said, systemic racism isn't the shark, it's the water. And that gets me every time, because you're absolutely right. There's so much about unlearning. So thank you for all of that. So this one's a fun one because it's sort of future state and it hits at our hearts quite big. And Brittany, I'm going to you first. I'm switching up my ordering because I feel like I've been talking quite a bit. So when our dreams have been realized, when racial bias is truly eliminated, what do you think early childhood education will look like?
For me, I think it will look like we'll have more people understanding why is it so important to us about early education. We'll also have more parents engaged into it, because we done broke it down more step by step to them. So they're like, okay, now I can see, because you always have why the kids doing this with you and not me? Because you're not, they not focused on, they give them to us, we done. Like, we got it. No, we need your help. We need you to help us to get that together. So I feel like it'll just reach out more when everybody's on the same page. I feel like we'll get where we need to be. We're United for Children, where everybody that's doing early childhood together, like you say, get that prison to pipeline out the way.
Absolutely. Rashawn, how about you?
So for me, very much like Brittany, we'll be educating families, but I look at things through a little bit of a social emotional lens, because I think about children. So their parents are adult children. So if we look at the child, we have to look at the adult. The adult, so what it turns into is, how do we sometimes reteach and help those parents learn other skills as we work and teach these children? For me, real early education, it's all encompassing, and it's working with the family as a whole. It's working with the child and the child care, the teachers and the directors. It is really, how do we support them so then that way they can, receive equitable services for themselves and for their children. It's not about just, hey, we're going to just give a bunch of centers a lot of toys. We can provide all of the toys that each center needs. Okay, fine. We can support, we can give them all the equipment. But what is the equipment without the actual work? What does the equipment mean if there is no meaning to the equipment? And if you just give me a toy and you don't tell me how to use it, then I use it however it's set up. So one of the things that I really focus a lot on what's called Maslow's hierarchy. So Maslow's hierarchy basically says that if children have their physiological needs met, which is air, water, food, shelter, clean house, love, if they have those things met, then kids are able to move to the next stage in life, which is safety needs, and then love and beyond belonging, and then self-esteem. And then what the true goal is for kids to meet self-actualization, to really authentically figure out who they are. And so how do we support the children, but also how do we support the families? Because we can't take care of children without taking care of families. They're one and the same. We have to work together to grow this community, not just St. Louis, Missouri. Like, we need to grow Missouri. And one of the things I would like to just kind of throw out there is that United for Children is committed in breaking the preschool to prison pipeline. We are having a conference this fall, breaking the preschool to prison pipeline, focusing on building the preschool to promise, because we want to promise children a great life. They deserve that.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. I was going to ask you about revisiting the preschool to promise pipeline, right, and reshaping that perspective. Gail, I wanted to make sure to give you an opportunity as well as you think about the futures. And I think candidly, Brittany and Rashawn have shared some really beautiful points, but just want to make sure if there's anything that you'd like to add to the conversation, that I give you the mic as well.
What Rashawn had just touched upon about parents and providers being able to advocate for themselves and be able to advocate for their children, and to that it is more than just having materials. It is the when we see when it's realized or racial bias is eliminated, all of our families will be empowered to understand the importance of early childhood and have access to whatever support their child needs. Many children across all, economic and racial, across all spectrums have needs and have varied needs. And so each individual child is different. And if parents and providers have the skills and the resources in order to meet those needs, we will really be addressing that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And I agree with you guys. I love what you guys are talking about really bringing the community together. Brittany, I was sort of giggling when you said folks sort of hand off their kids and then leave. Because you're absolutely right. If we're not providing children with consistent support, consistent boundaries, consistent messaging, then the work that we do during one part of the day, I mean, we know there are so many people who are involved in touching a child's life and impacting a child's life that I love what you guys are talking about in terms of really community focused child raising, candidly. I mean, so that's beautiful and it's given me chills. I do have more questions, but I know we've got a great group together here today. I know we've had a lot of activity in the chat. I'm actually happy to open up and see if any of our folks here on the phone have any questions they'd like to share. You're welcome to share them out loud. If you're in a loud atmosphere and you prefer to chat them, you can chat them and our staff can ask. So I'm going to actually ask y'all a question while we're kind of giving folks the opportunity. If you do have a question, you're welcome to raise your hand, but while we're getting those in. So in what ways do you invite providers along? Because again, right, we're talking about how we're all on a journey. We are all on a journey of learning and unlearning and relearning in a constant cycle of reevaluating what you've been taught and thinking about different ways and who moved my cheese and all of the different ways in which, I mean, if I hear the word pivot one more time from 2020, I was like, that is the most corporate speak for all of our lives went into a blender. But truly, as we are all working together to advance this conversation around racial equity in ACE, how do you think we can bring providers along in this journey with us? And again, I'm switching up. So actually, Gail, I'm going to start with you today. How do you think we can invite providers, again, along in this work about eliminating racial bias in ACE?
First is to educate our providers and then we have to build the relationships. If we don't spend time to build relationships, we're not able to have some of those honest, tough conversations. Many of our providers don't necessarily recognize that when they aren't able to meet a child's needs, that is expulsion, that if a child is having a challenging behavior and or is aggressive and a provider doesn't have the resources to support that, or they don't have the extra staff to support that, they oftentimes aren't given much choice but to remove that child from their center, because they have to keep in mind the safety of all. And that becomes an expulsion for that child. So that child is then starting on that prison or that preschool to prison pipeline. And that happens to our African-American children much more often than it does the white children in our community. And so providing our childcare providers and the centers with support to meet those children's needs is critical. And basically, I try to ask them questions. I don't come in and I try to come in with a clear, open mind in order to build that relationship, and ask them questions about what their needs are. So and how we can be a support in order to be a success for all children.
Excellent, thank you. Rashawn and Brittany, is there anything that you guys would want to add to that piece as well about how we can really engage our providers and help kind of bring them along on this journey with us?
I would just add on to what Gail was saying about the most important thing is to build a trusting relationship and be authentic and be honest. And that's, a lot of times when people see, when a lot of the directors, when they see that we are there for them and we're not there criticizing, because you can't go into a community telling folks that everything that they do is wrong. That's not going to build the relationship.
They'll show you the door quickly.
Yeah, and they will definitely show you the door. And so it's really about making sure that we are authentic and honest, and we are going to say if we say we're going to do something, then we're going to do it. And if we can't do it, we say, hey, I can't do this, but let's think about how we can revamp this, or let's think about how we can rework this. But it's always about being honest and truthful and upfront. And that is how you build relationships and in working to eliminate some of those systemic racism and racial biases. And I don't mean just in Black communities, I mean in all communities, because there are centers that may not accept Gail. There are just as many centers that may not accept me. But if I go in authentic and true, then we can work, we can figure something out. So it's about being authentic and true and honest.
Absolutely. And candidly, I think that authenticity, that transparency, that vulnerability, those elements are so crucial to really everything that we've spoken about today, right? Because the learning and unlearning that I was referencing, there's some discomfort in that, and recognizing that, like, you may be carrying your own internal biases, and you do need to understand the systems, and you do need to understand what got us here. And so there's a lot about honesty and transparency. And to your point, if something's not going to work, let's tell you so, and let's work around it to find a solution together. I think that's wonderful. Oh yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I saw Tim put something in the chat, and I wanted to actually address it since he put it in there, if
Yep.
that was okay.
If you'll give me I actually was about to do that. So I just want to read it to the group in case anyone can't see the chat or is on their phone and not able to. But yes, absolutely, that's what I'm going to do. So we've got a great question in the chat that says, certainly we want to reduce preschool suspensions and expulsions, but how do we define a successful outcome in the preschool to promise pipeline? Are there any metrics that can easily measure it, or is it more around breaking down the barriers and letting individuals define success? Great question, Tim. To you, my friends.
Okay.
Yes, Rashawn, please.
So what Dee put in the chat absolutely is pivotal, because preschool suspension is something that's an indicator. So just so you know, Tim, by 3rd grade, I actually learned this a few years back. I went to a NACCE conference in Atlanta, and there is this premier childcare facility that was built by Coca-Cola. It has this beautiful history about why it was built, where it was built, and it's fantastic. And in that, going to that center, the thing that I learned is actually what Dee just put in the chat. If children are below reading and comprehension levels by the 3rd grade, that's how they determine how many beds they need going down the line. It starts off with an inequitable educational system. If your school district does not have the equipment for you to be successful, what happens is you don't have all the resources. And it's not just the school district, it's the neighborhood, it's the foundation, it's the community, it's all encompassing. And so I can say this, my grandparents were people who lived adjacent to the Wellston community. The Wellston community used to be a very bustling and thriving African-American community that has become dilapidated because of lack of resources, lack of funding, lack of community support into this area. So when the resources when the home ownership, which people don't realize, when home ownership is not something that is prevalent in a community, the homeowners, when you're a renter, you don't have stake. When you're a homeowner, you have stake into what happens in your community. So if you don't have people who are homeowners who have stake and who can go up against, and they put their money into the school district, then what happens is that the school district fails. And then everything is based upon the few taxes from the different buildings, or the few homeowners, or the few which are supposed to make this school district thrive. So when children don't have what they need at an early age, and we don't help people learn those skills. So that's when I talk about learning life skills for parents. It's not just learning how to take care of your kids. It's learning how to have a bank account. It's learning how to purchase things. It's learning how to save money. It is all encompassing changing the trajectory of the life of a family, which changes the trajectory of the life of the community, which grows the school district. And that's how you change that path.
You just gave me the chills. You just gave me the chills. That was incredible. Thank you so much. Gail, is there anything that you would want to add, or Brittany as well?
I was just going to make a comment, and Elisa mentioned it in the chat. when Tim asks about, what are some good indicators or metrics that we could use to see if we're meeting that preschool to promise pipeline. Some of the things is that social emotional development of children. If a child going into kindergarten is able to calm themselves or is able to take care of has some independent self-help skills, they are much more likely to be reading on grade level by the time they hit 3rd grade. Which is why we spend so much time in our work on focusing on that social emotional development. Oftentimes in early childhood, our providers are so focused on academics, like they have letters everywhere, they have words everywhere, they talk about letters, they practice letter sounds, they put letters in every aspect of the classroom. And we forget that social emotional development needs to be taught with that same kind of rigor and that same kind of passion that we put into reading. Because if our children aren't able to calm themselves or aren't able to have those, meet that Maslow's pyramid, that lower level, I think it's what's the emotional level. If we don't have some of that self-control and social emotional skills, then we aren't able to access that higher level thinking, to do the problem solving and build the language and build our reading and writing skills. Everything is so interconnected. And I feel that sometimes our focus from parents and from our providers and teachers are on the academics, that they think the social emotional is not as critical, when really that is the foundational piece in order to teach the academic.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So thank all three of you. Thank you so much for the discussion today. I want to hand the conversation back to Dee to kind of close us up and hand things off. So thank you all again. Truly, Rashawn, Gail, Brittany, this was really a valuable conversation, a very impactful conversation. And I just want to thank all three of you very much for being so transparent and vulnerable and sharing your hearts and thoughts with us. So Dee, happy to hand it back to you.
Thank you. I won't take too much time because Brooke has a few words to say as well before we're finished, but I want to bring it all back where we're talking about systematic racism, the segregation in our community, specifically St. Louis, and child outcomes. We can look back to the For the Sake of All report that Dr. Jason Purnell had created several years ago, about 6 years ago now, the First Steps to Equity report, the Ferguson Commission report, and many others in the last handful of years, to show that child outcomes and community outcomes really do include high quality early childhood education, and specifically building the social emotional skills of children, and helping prevent challenging behaviors, helping prevent developmental delays, helping them, yes, learn how to read. But in order to read, you have to be able to love to read, right? So, and Sheila from Ready Readers is here. That's for you. And so it all comes, so back to your question, Tim, it all works together, right? There is not one thing, it all works together. And the negative experience that children have early on in life, and blatant racism is trauma. Systematic racism and the impacts from the trauma in their community is trauma. The more negative experiences the child has at an early age, we called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, the more likely they're going to enter that prison pipeline. We have to do the work of preventing, and that brings in resources and education to their caretakers, their child care providers, their educators, and their families. So we just scratched the surface. We have a lot more we can talk about, and we look forward to talking more next time. I'll hand it on to Brooke. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Brooke Bennett. I'm the advancement officer with United for Children. This is just our second Lunch and Learn of 2021. So we are excited to continue to share this journey with you. Our next Lunch and Learn is happening on Thursday, July 22nd. And then our final one is set for October 28th. So mark your calendars now. You're not going to want to miss this discussion. Our final one, or our next one actually, is talking about diving into firsthand experiences from our childcare providers in our community themselves. So I hope you can join us for that. Obviously, a big thank you to Beth and all of our panelists. It's hard to follow up, you know, after all the things that have been said today and the work that you guys do. We appreciate all of that. Before you guys leave today, I just want to make sure that you connect with United for Children, following us on social media, keeping up with our other events. We have a trivia night coming up in June, and then our Lighting the Way Gala is set for September 9th. So we hope you can join us again too. We've got really exciting things happening for our donors with newsletters and updates and heartfelt stories from our community. So I hope you get on our mailing list to receive those updates. As we continue to do our partner community, the future looks really promising. And if you're inspired today and you're eager to get involved, we've recently launched a monthly giving program called United for Children. I'm sorry, that's us, Change for Children. This program is an incredible opportunity if you're just getting started in philanthropy or you're looking to make a more meaningful contribution. It even includes a thank you gift for you to tout about in the community. And right now we're actually accepting founding members of this program. So I highly encourage you to go to our website under Get Involved to learn more. We know the work is important and we look forward to having you be involved in our story. Lastly, our team is going to stay on the call to answer any lingering questions and to connect with you. So please feel free to stay on. I wanted to share this final quote with you. As we know, it is Earth Day. And one of the things when I was in the classroom, I made Earth Day a really big deal for our children, because one of the quotes that's really important to me is that we do not inherit the planet from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And so that's applicable to not just Earth Day, but to this scenario as well. We're making the world better for our children. So thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Pick up some trash, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.